You love me for me. Yes sir. Yeah. Now remember the story about Peter, how himself and the other disciples, they were in the boat and they saw Jesus, right? Now they were not sure that it was Jesus that was on the water. What did Peter do? Peter said, Lord, see, if you are the one, bid me to come. That's what he said, bid me to come. And then Jesus told him, Peter, come. Alright? Peter, come. That word was for Peter. Peter was the one that spoke and asked. And so Peter stepped out from the boat to the water. And he was walking on the water. And he walked on water towards Jesus. Right? So that was stuff. It was happening live. He was walking on the water. Big time. Peter walking on the water. Leaving the other disciples behind in the boat. But he was walking. He was focused on Jesus, who he was going to meet. And he walked on water while focusing on Jesus and going to meet him. Something happened, right? He saw the winds blowing. The winds blowing. He saw, not that the wind. He took his eyes away from where he was going and was looking at the situations that were all around him, right? Situations all around him, really strong. Now, he did not begin to sink because of the situations around. But when he was afraid, the Bible says that he was afraid and he began to sink. Simple. Fear of what was happening around him and what could happen to him made him to sink. It happened to him when he was afraid that it will happen to him. He began to sink. And all those stuff happened because he took his eyes away from Jesus and he was no longer focused on what he was called to do. He was no longer focused on what he had to do. Yeah, what he had to do. So whatever is your calling, you see, things are going to happen. But what happens to you does not necessarily make you sink. What happens to you cannot make you sink. Your fear of what happens to you makes you sink. Alright, so he cried out to Jesus, and we know how that went. He cried out to Jesus, and Jesus loved him. Yeah, he loved him for him. And Jesus said, he took his hand, because he cried, took his hand and said, oh, little faith, come on, why were you looking at the winds? Focus on me. And Jesus walked with Peter back to the boat. Watch this. When they entered the ship, the winds ceased. It means that the presence of Jesus did not take away the winds that was blowing. Instead, the presence of Jesus made Peter no longer to sink. They walked on water and entered the ship. When the walk was done, the winds ceased. When the walk was done, the winds ceased. The presence of God does not mean that you're not going to go through stuff. That's it. Take it. It doesn't mean you won't go through stuff. But God will ensure that He is with you, holding your hand all the way. And when your work is done, the winds cease. So if the winds are still blowing, your work is not done. If the winds are still blowing around you, your work is not done. Focus on the one who called you and what you heard. On what you heard. Yeah. And you will see yourself getting to the finish line. You will get to the finish line. Yeah, so that's it for me. Take it. Word. Stuff. God stuff.